She was one game away from getting out of trouble. One game. That was all Eala needed to close the door, walk off the court, and avoid the kind of physical battle every tennis player fears. She never got that game. And what happened next turned a packed Canadian stadium into something that sounded less like a tennis tournament and more like a national celebration. Nearly 10,000 people were about to watch a 21-year-old athlete make one of those decisions that tells you far more about a competitor than any trophy ever could. Her body was sending warning signs. Her ankle had already buckled. The trainers had been called. Her opponent had found new life. Momentum was shifting fast. Alex had every reason to stop. She didn't. But to understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to go back before Toronto, before the medical timeout, before thousands of fans suddenly went silent at the exact same time. Because the biggest sports stories usually don't begin with a roar. They begin quietly. Start in Washington. Alex arrived there as a talented young player with growing expectations, but she left as something completely different, a champion. She captured a WTA 500 title, the kind of breakthrough that can change the way an entire tour looks at you almost overnight. One week you're an exciting prospect. The next week, everybody in the locker room knows your name, studies your patterns, and understands that you're no longer someone they can overlook. That transition happened fast. Normally, after a career-changing title, a player gets some breathing room. A few days to celebrate. Recovery sessions. Ice baths. Treatment. Maybe a quiet dinner with family and coaches. Alex barely had any of that. Within days, she was traveling again, flying to Toronto with a body that hadn't fully recovered from everything she'd just put it through. And that's important, because what happened next wasn't happening to a fresh athlete. It was happening to someone already running on a limited tank. Before she had even played a point in Toronto, something unusual was already happening. Her opening match sold out. Not a semifinal. Not a final. Not a blockbuster showdown between two longtime superstars. Her first match. Every seat gone. The tournament itself appeared to recognize that something bigger than a normal early round match was building around her. Organizers were already talking about the kind of crowd they expected before that crowd even showed up. Then the fans arrived. And somehow, the real thing was even louder. Broadcasters found themselves reacting to the atmosphere during the match. Philippine flags weren't tucked into a few corners of the stadium. They seemed to take over entire sections, rising together every time Alex won a big point. Every rally mattered. Every fist pump got a response. Every time she looked toward the stands, the noise climbed another level. Her opponent wasn't some easy first-round obstacle either. Alex was facing an experienced professional who knew how to handle pressure. But the atmosphere made the match feel bigger than two players competing across a net. For a few hours, it felt like a piece of the Philippines had been dropped into the middle of Toronto. Alex won in straight sets. Then she gave the crowd a moment that perfectly captured what was happening between her and the fans. She turned toward the stands and asked them to get even louder. Think about that. She had just won the match. She could have waved, smiled, thanked everyone, and headed toward the tunnel. Instead, she wanted more noise. That was a small gesture, but it said everything. The connection was growing. And once momentum starts building like that, expectations come with it. Her next match brought another opponent with experience, confidence, and supporters of her own. And once again, the word spread before the first ball had even been struck. Sold out. Again. Now it wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. And patterns create pressure. Every victory meant the next match became a bigger event. More people wanted tickets. More flags showed up. More cameras followed her. More fans expected the run to continue. Alex delivered another straight-set win. And by this point, people weren't describing the atmosphere like a normal tennis tournament anymore. The coverage began to sound more like people were describing a festival. A cultural event with a tennis match happening in the middle of it. That's when you know the story has crossed into different territory. But sports never stay comfortable for long. The next challenge changed everything. Across the net stood an experienced American, the kind of player who had dealt with hostile crowds and pressure before. And for the first time during this Toronto run, Alex wasn't simply cruising. She found herself searching, adjusting, fighting from uncomfortable positions. Still, she managed to take the opening set. At that point, it seemed like the danger had passed. It hadn't. During the second set, Alex's ankle gave way. The reaction inside the stadium was immediate. Medical staff came onto the court. The match stopped. And thousands of people who had been roaring only moments earlier suddenly went quiet. It's one of the strangest sounds in sports. A packed stadium with almost no noise because everyone is staring at the same athlete, wondering if the match is over. Imagine being one of the Filipino supporters in that crowd. Maybe you traveled across Canada. Maybe you flew in. Maybe you had waited weeks just to see Alex play in person. And now you're watching trainers work on her ankle while she sits on the court trying to figure out whether she can continue. That's no longer just entertainment. That's fear. Real fear. And then came the decision. Alex stood up. She kept playing. For a while, it looked like she might escape without paying a bigger price. She moved within one game of finishing the match. One game away from ending the entire thing before her opponent could take advantage of the injury. But she couldn't close it. Her opponent saw the opening. She saw Alex's movement becoming harder. She saw an opportunity to extend the match. And she took it. 3 straight games followed. The second set was gone. Suddenly, Alex was headed into a deciding third set on a compromised ankle. Now add everything else together. The title run in Washington. The travel. The limited recovery. The doubles matches alongside one of the legends of the sport. The physical minutes already piling up. And now a 3-set battle after an ankle scare. This is the nightmare scenario athletes don't like talking about. Not getting beaten because someone is simply better that day. Getting beaten because your body runs out before your competitive fire does. So what do you do? What do you do when nearly 10,000 people are watching you limp between points? What do you do when the other player has the momentum? What happens when your instincts tell you to fight, but your body is telling you to protect yourself? That's when highlight reels stop mattering. That's when you learn what kind of competitor somebody really is. Alex didn't disappear. She didn't unravel emotionally. She didn't allow the momentum shift to become the end of the match. Instead, she started rebuilding it one point at a time. No miracle shot.
No magical shortcut.
Just work. One rally. One hold. One opportunity. One game after another. And eventually, she closed it out. Alex won the deciding set. She survived the match. That victory pushed a singles winning streak to 7 matches across 2 different countries, coming through increasing pressure while her body was clearly paying the price. There was nothing easy about it. This wasn't the kind of win where an athlete walks off looking untouched. It looked more like survival. And sometimes, survival tells you more than dominance ever can. Because great players aren't always going to have their best tennis available. Sometimes the timing is off. Sometimes the legs are heavy. Sometimes something hurts. Sometimes your opponent senses weakness and attacks it. The question is whether you can still find another path. Alex did. She found it with grit, stubbornness, and a refusal to let one ugly momentum swing define the ending. And that changed the story surrounding her. Before the match, the story was that Eala was an exciting young star capable of attracting huge crowds. Afterward, the story became more serious. Now opponents had evidence that even when things went physically wrong, she wouldn't necessarily go away. There's a big difference between being popular and being dangerous. Fans admire talent, but they build a deeper connection with resilience. Toronto had just watched that resilience play out only a few feet away. And the tournament wasn't done testing her. Next came a completely different challenge. Waiting in the following round was Belinda Bencic, the experienced Swiss star and Olympic gold medalist. That changes the equation immediately. This wasn't simply another rising player standing across the net. Bencic had already proven herself at the highest levels of the sport. She had played huge matches, handled major pressure, stood on the Olympic podium. And now Alex had to face that caliber of opponent less than 48 hours after battling through an ankle scare and an exhausting 3-set match. Think about what the atmosphere would be like when Alex stepped onto the court again. The same flags. The same chants. But now the crowd knows more. They've seen the ankle buckle. They've watched the trainer come out. They've seen Alex pushed into a deciding set when the match looked almost finished. So the energy isn't only excitement anymore. There's anxiety mixed into it. Every hard change of direction matters. Every awkward landing matters. Every long rally makes people wonder whether the ankle can keep taking it. The supporters aren't only hoping she wins. They're hoping her body gives her enough of a chance to compete. And that's why this run became so compelling. Every time the story looked straightforward, it changed shape. First, it was about a young champion arriving from Washington. Then it was about sold-out crowds. Then it became about Filipino flags turning Toronto into something that felt almost like home court. Then the injury happened. Then survival. Now the question becomes whether a tired, taped-up 21-year-old can somehow stand across from an Olympic champion and do it again. And if you zoom out, there's something even bigger happening. Toronto showed that Alex wasn't just climbing the rankings. She was becoming the kind of athlete who changes the environment around a tournament. Sessions built around her were filling up. Broadcasters were talking about the crowd almost as much as the tennis. Organizers were anticipating her impact before she walked onto the court. Thousands of people were showing up not just to watch elite tennis, but specifically to see her. That's rare. And it didn't appear overnight. The foundation had been building for months. Miami helped people outside the Philippines take notice. More performances followed, showing that she could be dangerous against high-level opposition. Then Washington delivered the breakthrough trophy. Toronto turned all of that momentum into something much louder. Each city added another layer. Each match raised the stakes. And through it all, the same image kept returning. Packed stands, Philippine flags, and Alex somehow finding another way forward. So now the story reaches another crossroads. On one side of the net, an Olympic gold medalist with years of experience in the biggest moments. On the other, a 21-year-old coming off a title run, demanding travel, doubles duty, and a 3-set survival fight on an injured ankle. Nobody knows exactly how much she has left. Nobody knows whether the ankle will cooperate. Nobody knows whether the legs can handle another demanding match. But one thing Toronto has already learned is that counting Alex Eala out has become a dangerous habit. Every time the pressure has increased, she's answered. Every time this run looked like it might end quietly, the story got louder instead. And that's why this has grown beyond one tennis tournament in Canada. It's become a live story about talent, pain, belief, Filipino pride, and how far one athlete can keep pushing when thousands of people refuse to stop believing with her. The flags will be back. The crowd will be waiting. Across the net will be an Olympic champion. And somewhere before Alex walks onto the court, that ankle will be taped again. Then she'll step into the noise and find out exactly how much fight she still has left. And after everything Toronto has already seen, nobody should assume they know the answer.